So we got some scribbles from you. I'm not sure what they
Yeah.
mean exactly. I asked Scott, what do you want to speak about? Actually, he asked me first, but I never have ideas. You're the man of many ideas. So he sent me a little scribble from his notebook. And yeah, he had some ideas. So let's hear
Well,
it.
yeah, hey, what I realized after I scribbled some things down and then sent you a picture of it basically, um, was that I didn't write down the most important part of one of the things that I scribbled. I actually like kind of messed it up on the picture that I sent you. And so here's the idea. Um, have you ever considered that pitch? You familiar with the term pitch in
Hmm.
music? That pitch equals rhythm. Have you ever thought about pitch in terms of rhythm?
No, I'm also not the music philosopher myself. So why don't you expand?
So actually, I don't think it takes much like musical philosophy, but at first it to me it struck me as counterintuitive, which is like I think of rhythm as like drums, like the rhythm section, like I'm beating out a beat, like quarter notes or eighth notes or 4/4 time or things like, you understand the rhythm of the song, the
Hmm.
pace. Um, And then you think of the concept of pitch, which is like a note, like an A note or a B flat or a C sharp or whatever it is. Um, and I think about those as just notes. I didn't really think about it too deeply. But then you quickly remember that pitches are can be represented as frequencies, as like 432 hertz
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
6 hertz or things like that. And you realize that a frequency is something that's also time based. Whereas when you think of pitch and note, you don't think of time that often. And then it starts to click in for me that pitch note is actually rhythm because a frequency is really just a rhythm. So essentially, you can create any note just by controlling the rhythm. So, right, I can take a
Hmm.
wrench and bang it on a handrail, and depending on how quickly I bang the hammer on the rail, that actually changes the note and the pitch. So I can play any note that I can play on a piano, I can play on a handrail with a hammer,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it's just really interesting to me to think about um, that a concept like pitch, which gives the song or the melody like so much of its flavor and tone and meaning. And, you think of a melody as a combination of notes. You
Yeah.
don't think as a combination of rhythms, right?
Yeah.
You, but yet each note is merely just a particular rhythm. And so the song itself is actually just a sort of transition of rhythms. So I don't
Yeah.
know what do you think about that?
Well, it seems like very fractal, you know, like you have all these different, because when I think rhythm, I think a song has one rhythm or maybe two. But
Mhm.
in many ways, it's like many different, many mini songs inside of one bigger song. And then
Wow,
you have
yeah.
holes and you have the multiplicity and the unity as our good friend speaks about.
Uh,
That's what I'm thinking about.
that is true, right? I'm imagining now too these little sort of wavelets, and there's bigger waves or longer waves and smaller, shorter waves embedded within. Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about the fractals um
It's like
in that.
self-similar, right?
Yeah,
Self-similarity.
well, yeah, I guess. And then there are also things in music or electronic music or production where you use overtones, right? And you create certain tones or timbres just based on like the combination of overtones and
Hmm.
how those fractions sort of map onto one another. Um, and so again, thinking of a song as some like thing that has these different ratios of rhythms.
Yeah.
Um, is an interesting way to think about a song. Uh,
What conditions do you think you need before something is like a song? Because if you have something that's completely, I don't know, unharmonic, I don't know what the English word is, disharmonic, I'm not sure.
Disharmonious, maybe, or
The
disharmonic.
disharmony, does it still count as a song? Like when do you count something as a song? And then you can go to reality because I know Richard Watson speaks about. Well, I'm just getting into his theories now, but he's trying to
Okay.
draw the parallel between like organisms and evolution and
Yeah.
music. So similar with organisms, I guess at some point you have an organism, at some point you don't. Is that like the same with songs, you think?
Good. Yeah, good point. I think there probably is some of that gray area or just like granularity.
Mm,
Um, and like you said, there's with life, it's like, do you find a single cutoff point? It's like maybe that's the wrong way of even thinking about it, is that there is a single cutoff point.
mm,
Um, maybe again, there's a sort of fractal nature here to where we can zoom in indefinitely towards whatever boundary we see and realize that there's not actually a boundary there.
yeah.
And so maybe some of that scaling is there, but we can probably determine sort of useful boundaries that we can create distinctions around, and that's still
Mm,
good and fun to do. And like we should be able to say like this thing is alive or this thing isn't, even though we recognize that there may be sort of counter examples or in betweens.
yeah.
So when is a song not a song? Right, I guess what does that depend on? I think that's what you said. Um, I'm like immediately drawn to some sort of like observer dependent type of answer,
Yeah.
right? Where the nature of it being a song is that someone is hearing a song,
Hmm.
because let's say there's multiple observers and a song is being played, or maybe a potential song is being played, and I hear a song and my 5 month old doesn't hear the song. It's like
Yeah.
he's absorbing the sounds of the song, but is this song sort of this like emergent higher order property of noise or rhythms, I guess,
Yeah.
if you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
is a song just the notes? No. But is the song there without notes?
Mm,
Probably not.
yeah.
Not that case either.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of quantum physics, what you were speaking about, the parallel you draw with the observer. Is the song there without the observer? You said potential as well, which I think is the exact same language that people use when speaking about the particles, let's say, or the
Right.
waves.
Yeah. Duality.
Yeah,
Well, what do you think about, can you get a song without an observer? What do you think? Does it
I
exist in a
don't.
Platonic sense?
Yeah, that's possible. I'm not sure. I don't know if I should think about it similarly to mathematics. I've asked this question to you before, and I think you said that you didn't think it was exactly objective like mathematics, and numbers.
Oh,
They're
we
like,
did into that last time, didn't
yeah, we
we?
did, yeah, a while back. I don't know what it is with music. I've been getting into, you were asking me before, what ideas am I exposing myself to? I've actually started listening to this producer who interviews artists among many other people. And then he asks the artists like what they think about music and all these things. And what really inspired me was that um, there's this one artist I really like, and she said that when she makes music, she's just trying to mimic nature, let's say. And she says that the music comes to her. It's like um, same with what's his name, Mozart. He gets the music in one go, and then he has to spell out the notes. So in that
Mhm.
sense, I think they might actually be, because to them they are given, like they're received. They don't create them out of thin air. So I guess you have to be receptive to it. But I don't know if we are necessary, like if we are the necessary component to actualize the songs. Perhaps the songs are merely ideas before that.
Okay. Maybe there's like archetypal songs out there. Some are
Yeah.
more harmonious than others,
Yeah.
or we've been fine-tuned to a certain set of like harmonies.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking about though in terms of like what makes it harmonious or what makes it disharmonious, or what
Hmm.
does that dictate whether it's a song or not. And I actually, you saw probably on my scribblings, I was thinking about harmony in terms of almost like a scale of health or unhealthiness, right?
Yeah.
And
What you
so,
mean by that?
well, I guess if I'm thinking about well, I mean, if I'm sort of going all of the way, with, as you said, quantum physics and wave particle duality and or string theory or something. I'm thinking about real waves or fields that you know comprise, I guess, what I
Yeah.
am. And so, am I just a bunch of rhythms or frequencies or waves or pitches or notes? Like, is my existence actually a song because it's just made of rhythms and cycles and there's a certain motif to being me?
Yeah.
Um, and So, harmony or disharmony, it seems just like it's like an indicator of your health or something. It's like, is your being in harmony or not?
Yeah.
And not, maybe that is sort of manifest or represented like in disease or pain or
Yeah, that
um
actually makes sense to be honest. I think that I heard what's his name? Peterson and the mathematician who was also training Richard no, what's his name? Do you know the Theory of Everything movie?
yes.
What's Stephen Hawking? Stephen
Yeah.
Hawking, and then you had his teacher at that school, and he's still alive, and his name is people will know. Anyway, it's this guy, and they were discussing mathematics, but also music in the same conversation. So that's funny. It comes back to me. Um, and Peterson said that he thought that music was meaningful because it seems to reflect reality. So the patterns where you have the recurring patterns, and then you have the dynamic quality within the songs. It seems to be a reflection of reality. And I guess if your life is not like that, then it's disharmonious and it can cause you to be sick or depressed. And similar people that experience mystical experiences, let's say people that go on psychedelics, what Vervaeke speaks about then is that he says that a lot of those people, they experience a reality and then they come back and then they want to make their reality more like that reality. And that reality, I think, is similar to music. And there's always music involved, well, often with these shamanic rituals,
Sure.
like I want to make that like this. So I guess it reflects something very true, um, of these patterns, let's say. So that the harmony is, I guess, and that brings me actually to a bigger idea because last week I was asked if I thought there was a true or more true worldview, like if there's a worldview that's more true than another. And I actually think that beauty is an indication that your perception is correct. So I
Mm.
actually believe, and I can't prove this at all, but I actually believe that the depth that beauty affords is an indication that it's more real than the shallowness of a suspicious worldview, let's say.
Interesting.
So that's
Okay.
disharmony.
Yeah, I see. I think that is true too. That gut feeling of beauty is just some not explicit understanding of good or something,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, what was what stuck out to me was that you used the word depth of beauty. So there is beauty that's shallow and there is beauty that's deep. Is that what you're suggesting too?
Well, I'm not sure if it's still beauty if it is shallow or it's
Ah,
a
so
very
there's a cutoff. That's where we have to go give ourselves a little
maybe.
boundary. And
Yeah, maybe we
you know,
do. Because if
um,
something is not very beautiful, then I guess it's shallow. But is it still beautiful then, or is it just ugly? I don't
right.
know.
Yeah, it's and then to think about the different perspectives or points of view that can find or experience beauty when sort of simultaneously viewing the same or very, very similar or corresponding images. That interpretation of beauty is really interesting too. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it makes me think that although like the way that beauty is connected to values for each person may not be the same, the
Yeah.
fact that there is a connection between beauty and values, I think is present in everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Beauty and values for sure. Do you actually think that things are beautiful? or do you think that you just interpret them as beautiful? Do you think there's some underlying actual beauty?
My first thought is to say no, but then I quickly change to yes when I just include myself in whatever it is that I'm looking at out there.
Yeah.
Uh, is that we share some nature or some history or some origin, I think, or just the fact that we're sort of entangled, that which I'm viewing and that like which I am. And so in a certain sense, that knowing that that underlying connection is there, like that there's roots under the ground, it makes me think that there is something uh objectively beautiful out there.
Mm.
Yeah, because I
Okay.
feel like I can determine in my thinking and my awareness whether it I can recognize whether I feel like it's beautiful or not,
Yeah.
right? Um and yeah, that's connected to something out there which is fundamentally the same, maybe on the deepest levels. Or again, like you said, similar patterns.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, there's a lot to open up with this when you bring in ideas of like resonance and frequencies and things that you can be attuned to or not, right?
Yeah.
There's yeah, and just thinking about our universe as like electromagnetic also, which
Yeah.
is it's such a cool part of physics and chemistry and biology too.
How do you mean that electromagnetic?
Well, just like that living systems, well, and in non-living systems, just the physics of the world seems to have energy as one of the fundamental concepts. Like we
Yeah.
can't really describe what energy is, I guess, to, a certain degree, but we know that there's these relationships of, you say, forces of electricity and magnetism that are sort of co-creating or mutually causal or something like that, or
Yeah.
at least interacting. Um, and that the chemistry and the biology are responsive to some of those, or the chemistry and biology is just a responsive thing. And then we map sort of what those responses
Yeah.
and patterns are with physics, which is like just symbols that represent concepts and relationships and things like that. And it's just electricity and magnetism is one of those central things.
Yeah.
Um, so
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I got you. Do you have a certain direction you want to go into based on
today,
what we've just spoken about? Is
gosh,
there anything
man.
you want to dig in deeper to? Because otherwise, I'll steer us in a different direction.
Hmm.
Because we had music, I think you had more thoughts on it for sure.
Well, I'm trying to continue to bring things back to this, just like talking it out with people, this idea of tension.
Hmm.
Um, and putting things in terms of music, I think maybe that's a reason why I like the musical metaphor so much, is because tension is again a sort of like deep and diverse concept within music, where at different levels,
Yeah,
like there's tension in the story of the music, there's tension in the crescendo of like the expectations, um but then there's also simple things like the tension that you put on the string like
yeah,
dictates actual sound, right? And that there needs to be tension there. And so again, at these different layers, there's this sort of tension, um, or even in just like the holding things together. Um, what is it? How do you know when the song ends and begins?
mm,
Like again, it's like, what is this, a song or is this not a song? What about just one song? It's like, how do you know when the song is over? How do you know when the song has started? Um, those those are interesting boundaries to think about. And yeah, there's just some tension that holds the song together, where what is the song and what's after
yeah.
the song has already been played. And so I wonder about what are those connections or those relations, or the tensions.
I think that's something really for artists to answer. That's which is why I was so interested in hearing artists speak about well music more deeply. Do you ever make music yourself?
So, um, not to a high degree of difficulty.
Mm,
Um, I have at different times had access to a piano where I can just kind of just play around with different melodies and things, but not writing it down. Not, but I have developed some patterns over time that I could go sit down and play right now. Um, so I've done a bit of that. And then I also did, for a while, I lived with people actively making and performing music, and
hmm.
they recorded and rehearsed music in our apartment, and we all lived together. And so I have a really deep insight into like making songs and just the musicianship of my friends that I lived with and that why do you ask, or have you, like, what's important about making music? What insight does that give, you think?
I think it gives you a non-propositional insight into some of the questions you were asking, such as the one about tension. I think knowing when a song ends or begins, I think an artist can do that quite well. Like I've had times where I was much more immersed into music, and then you can kind of like discover the melody. Let's say you let yourself be guided by it, and then you try to listen when it's supposed to end. I think that's one of the reasons why artists are much more prone to believe in God or something objectively out there because it completely seems like it's not you doing that, you know?
Hmm.
Like those patterns, they're not you. You have to interact with them, let's say. So that's why I asked because I thought maybe you had an insight into it that is also perhaps hard to explain, but that
That
is
is,
there.
yeah, it's something. You said it was non-propositional, is that what you said?
Yeah, I think you can't really fully explain it. I can try to, but
Good. I like that sort of category that you're letting me in on. Like, thanks for saying it that way. Like, is don't necessarily describe it all the time. It's just
yeah,
something you do and you intuit, or you have impulses like that just arise. I have some of that in, I guess, in the music very minimally, a little bit more in like sketching. I may have mentioned that to you before. Like, I
yeah,
did a series of like compass drawings. I experienced that sort of artistry and like the tension of what goes where and where to stop and what looks beautiful or good or even sort of weird, or
yeah,
there's this like, I don't want to like the grotesque sort of beauty
yeah.
sometimes, the like counter beauty that I started to like see a little bit. The other place though that I think is just like in athletics, I think that that is a form of like artistry too, which I experienced mostly like in playing soccer, but actually now as an adult I actually like to try to dance a little bit, and like that
Cool.
sort of um uh again, like not deciding but like doing something. It's so weird sometimes when I'm able to like really let go, like in dance, and like be connected with just the movement of, well, the movement of the song, and like
Yeah,
the tension in my body, and like the potential placement of my body. It's, and again, like you said, it's like I'm not really doing it.
no,
I didn't plan it out. And so I do have a sense of that. And you're right, it's like the flow mentality kind of.
yeah.
So
And it
yeah,
requires a lot of discipline as well. Like you're talking about dancing, making music, and athletics. Like you don't get into that if you're untrained usually.
that's very true. Um it takes some investment of practice
Yeah,
to even allow yourself to sort of let go.
yeah.
Except maybe like in ecstatic cases where people just like start like whatever, just dancing all over the place, like,
Uh-huh.
totally letting go, you can just like drop down into that and really like let loose. Um, so that's really interesting. It's much harder with a musical instrument because it literally is, it's an instrument. Like
Yeah,
you have to have lots of like control
Hmm.
to do that, where the body is a little bit more straightforward. You have
Yeah,
more.
you can just burst out. No,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
Yeah, I recently thought about this, and I thought about it like the masculine and the feminine, or let's say the order and the chaos. Like you need to have that structure. You need to build that up. You know what I'm saying?
sure.
And then once you have that level of discipline, then you can let the feminine reign free, and then you can like start to dance. And that's
Yeah.
much more mysterious, whereas the masculine is much more repetitive and much more structured.
But as you said, in order to reach certain potentials like that the feminine offers,
Hmm.
some of that requires a prerequisite of whatever masculine structure, or like framework,
Yeah.
some sort of foundation. Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, One thing, what do you think about okay, so here's an interesting thing. Um, so I often have been trying to equate uh this idea of like potential with something maybe we would just call like virtual. And the
Okay.
reason that I want to try to connect from potential to virtual is in that sort of subjective experience. So it's like the virtual is almost like the subjective version of potential. Um,
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
sorry.
I had to say
I'm
it
so
again.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
The
Um,
virtual is the subjective version of potential.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like extracting from the potential,
Yeah.
but it's not actualized. It's still like a virtual, right? So
Yes. Yes. Okay.
for
Yes.
example, like
Okay. Now I got it. I
with
see
an
it now.
with an athlete, right? Like I'm about to make a decision or a reaction to, let's say in soccer, like I'm running down to the top of the box and the winger is about to cross the ball in, and
Hmm.
I'm having to like devise a plan, to jump up and get whip a
Yes.
header in.
Yeah.
So there's like a whole potential of like what actions I could take to have the outcome be like a header goal. And but at some point I'm going to extract from like all the potentials of like all the positions that I could run to, where I could jump, how I could position, beating my man a certain way, like using a screen or like whatever. Um at some point I like decide sort of, and then that becomes a virtual action
Yeah.
where I've committed to, I'm going to stop here, run in, plant, and like go up, right? Because at some point we do have to pick something to actually take the action. And so that's where I think of like this translation from the all potential actions and then some virtual action,
Yeah.
which you then try to enact. Um, so I wonder if that's another way of looking at this sort of, is there objective beauty out there,
Hmm.
or is the beauty just when we go and approach beauty or that we attend to beauty? The same thing with the potential action versus the virtual
Yeah.
and or the mathematical concepts and all of these different. So why do you think we see these like two distinctions? And I'm sure some philosophers out there could like say why this is a horrible wrong way to like look at things. you
Yeah.
know
Well, I think it's just so
all us
deeply
out on
embedded.
duality or something, like.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. It's the Aristotelian metaphysics that a lot of our society is built upon. So
Mm,
we find it difficult to find different categories. And I think it's funny with Verveke how he creates the third category, transjective, to try to break out of that. One metaphysics that I really like is by Robert Pirsig, and it's the metaphysics of quality. So he doesn't go to subject object, he goes to dynamic and static. That's his dichotomy. And I like it much more because to me it encompasses the world much better.
mm.
It's one that I play with a lot, like anything in my life. It's
Ah,
like,
very interesting.
yeah, it's very close to actually masculine and feminine. Static is the masculine, and dynamic is the feminine.
Ah, okay. I was gonna ask about the static. Because
Yeah.
I often think about things in terms of like constant dynamics, like how
Hmm.
to escape dynamics, like what does static even mean? But I see what you say, static in terms of, again, sort of structured, or like conservative, like
Yes.
uh, or sort of like fighting entropy, some
Hmm.
people might say, right? Like holding it together instead of letting it break down into entropy or
Yeah,
something.
that's fully dynamic. If it's fully,
Yeah,
yeah.
the one thing I wonder about, it's like, to me, it's almost like the static has this sort of implicit dynamics to it where it's like it's fighting against something just to
Hmm.
be static.
Hmm.
Right? So where it's not actually that different from the dynamic, which I think is a good thing. It's like there's some commonality, that there's movement. It's just that the static is a sort of like um equal and opposite, or
Yeah,
do you see what I'm saying
I
there?
see what you're saying.
It's like a balance versus an imbalance or
Hmm.
something. Um yeah, that's interesting. When you think about static and dynamic, um I start to think about friction,
Yeah, makes sense.
where there's generally friction between things that are moving
Hmm.
past one another, and in a certain sense they're opposing one another because they're different, and so again it's like this, the static friction is like what's holding it in the same place, and the dynamic friction is like when things are moving past each other.
Yeah.
um so I don't know, I'm just that's
No,
just
that's
like
interesting.
me, but
I'm also thinking about, you know, like this reality is ever changing. So in that sense, even the static is what you say, it's balancing instead of imbalancing, let's say. But if you go even deeper to the platonic realm, let's say, then you enter into truly statics. So I remember this is how John Vervaeke explained the Hegelian synthesis. He said you first had some Greek philosopher who was like, all reality is uh, dynamic, all reality is changing all the time. And then another philosopher was like, no, 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 all reality is actually static because, referring to the Platonic ideals and the forms, I must say. And then the Hegelian synthesis was like, no, actually, you have the static patterns, the archetypes, let's say, and then you have the images. That's what we view in reality. So
hmm.
in many ways the dynamic comes forth from the static, and there's different variations on it. And then even within, here's back to the fractal thing, right? Because even within our reality, we have the same dichotomy approaching.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And I wonder if, because you used the terminology of like images,
Hmm.
and like the static Platonic forms, I'm thinking about this sort of like casting shadows, where the Platonic forms are casting projections of what they are, the images that you noted, and
Yeah.
that order to cast an image, there has to be something else,
Hmm.
not the forms. That's not the image.
Yeah.
It's what it's the energy. It's the work that gets done through the forms to like actually project an image, right? It's like the light.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. This is how my brother tried to explain, I think, the good to me. He used the sun with that. He's like, we have our eyes and we have the objects, but we need the sun to see. And he said the sun is the good, I think.
yeah.
Maybe, but I'm not sure. I don't understand it well enough.
So that makes sense to me, the way that I like to think about things. And again, like I will, like I don't know anything. You know what I
Same.
mean?
Yeah.
I don't I don't really know, but like I just have intuitions.
Hmm.
And, I like to fall upon these like relationships of three. I think we've talked about that
Yeah.
before. This is like my tagline now, is like I think three is the number to go with. And I think of my three now as like one thing out of which two emerge, a pair,
Yes.
which makes three. And so in this case, it would be like the one is like the light, and then out of out of light, or on top of light, or something like with light, the relationship of the forms and the images are able to exist or something like
Isn't
that.
the light the relationship in that case?
I think so. I
Is
think
it?
so. That could definitely be a way to think about it. And um, that really works for the way that I think about things, which is how do you get to three? It's by taking a polarity and taking that third perspective
Yeah.
on the fact that there is a polarity. It's like you can think about things existing on the polarity in a sort of like flatland line sense, where it's like this thing is just like one dimensional. It's like you can go this way on the line or this way on the line.
Hmm.
And you take this view of like, oh, there's a line with a polarity, and that immediately brings in this third aspect, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that works with the way that you were describing the forms and the images.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like the Trinity almost, you know? You have,
Exactly. So do you want to keep stacking up these sort of triads? Like that's
yeah.
what I'm finding really interesting. Um, is that three just seems like there are so many that are related to the three. Um, Now, I haven't really, no, I haven't told you about like, or maybe I have. Did I tell you how I would like to try to categorize like everything, like zero, one, two, three, four, five,
We
six,
were
seven?
going on a journey, I think. We went from Tunis with the fence. Remember the
Oh yeah,
fence?
yeah.
And then we went to threeness
Okay.
and then we had to cut it off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I guess ultimately, like what I'm trying to work through is like plotting out all of these different categories, like fitting things into categories just based on number.
Hmm.
It's like not even needing to understand what the elements each mean, but just mapping how many elements there are in general. And then thinking that there is some story that takes us all the way through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It might be
Yeah.
fun to think about things in terms of like a cycle of eight, like an octave that
Hmm.
is just a fun place to start. Um, and that, yeah, every time you step up in adding a new aspect, um, you have to incorporate everything that has come before, and those
Mm.
still exist there, right? So
Yeah.
even in something that we categorize into like a relationship of four pieces, um, we have to recognize that there was a three, a two, a one, and a zero underneath that in order to get to four. And so thinking about those two things of like what fits into the categories, how are the categories different? Why is five different than three? Why is six different than eight? Why is one different than two? And then thinking about the story of cycling through, in my mind, just 0 through 7, and then starting a new cycle sort of again, I guess, would be something interesting. But there's many other systems that go above 8 and 10, and
These numbers, are they a framework for reality? What are they exactly? You're talking about two-ness and threeness. What are they?
I don't know. It just seems like a way for us to recognize difference.
Yeah.
It's like two is one more than three, and like if I take away one from three, I know what I get. So like I don't know. Why do we
Yeah.
see boundaries and count and um yeah, then thinking about number in terms of geometry instead, right? Which is like you could think about the number four as just like a four-sided shape. Um and it's only slightly different, but it's like, yeah, I know when there's an extra side. I can distinguish when there's three sides and when there's four. I don't know why, I don't know. It's just like I can tell that there's a difference. Um, so yeah,
Did you
it's a really,
ever think about the number zero?
oh yeah, that's like the craziest one, honestly. Um, because, well, I mean, anytime I start thinking about zero, I'm immediately bringing along infinity, basically.
Yes.
Um, so there's that sort of like loop of polarity, right? Where it's like infinity comes all the way around back to zero or something.
Yes, yes.
um, there's some like horizon between zero and infinity that's really similar,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
Um,
actually I heard that the number zero was discovered, like it was discovered at some point, like in history. Like a lot of like Egyptian mathematics, I don't think they even had the number zero for the longest time. I don't know. I don't know. Like to me,
Yeah,
it seems so
right.
obvious, but it helps. Like practically, it helped people a lot. The number zero in terms of what they could do.
Sure. Sure. Yep. And especially in recording things and
Yeah,
having a system, like abstract symbol or system for things.
yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, to me there's like two ways to like start with zero, which is like the idea of like nothing, right? Which is this kind of like zero-ness that we
Hmm.
can imagine, which but I think we quickly realize that that nothingness in reality, at least for us, is more like having one of something and taking it away,
Yeah.
which is the sort of the other side of zero. Like I have something and then that amount is gone. There's like an absence of some
Mm.
amount,
Hmm.
one,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so I think that's like, I don't know, to me, I think that's the way I think about nothing, which is just like everything taken away instead of like
Ah.
this fundamental nothingness,
Yeah.
um, where there wasn't even a one. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 It's kind of like you're the nothing after the fact that there was something. But what is the nothing before there's something? Maybe that's much more powerful. Maybe there's a really good book. It's called Religion and Nothingness by Nishitani. I don't know if you know him. I think he's from the Kyoto School. It's John
No.
Vervaeke's favorite book.
Oh
It's
wow.
like you can really follow it at the start and then goes into nothing. Goes into no, not into nothing, into extremely complex topics that I just can't. So I've read it multiple times, and then the first half I can really follow, and then afterwards it goes to zero. But
Oh,
it's interesting how it explores nihilism and nothing in the sense that in a way nothing is it's like nirvana, you know, and in another way it's complete depression. And the depression sounds more like what you just described. It's like, oh, I just had something and now it's gone. And the nirvana is more like, ah, finally, it's infinity. It's like it's the it's escaping the framework itself. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, right, right. And oh, another way maybe to like again like wrap around this polarity of like infinity or like everything and nothing, which is like um if you take into account everything, there's no difference, right? And so right, or
Yeah,
like if
yeah,
there's
yeah,
nothing,
exactly.
there's infinite difference. You know, it's like it's all potential or something like
Hmm.
that. You know, even though there's nothing there, it brings into that infinity, maybe like infinite potential. I said infinite difference, but like
Yeah,
yeah, so there's that similarity again of yeah, the nothing and everything is weirdly connected.
yeah. Maybe you can't have nothing without everything. Maybe you
Mm,
need both of them. I'm not sure if that's true.
yeah, the origins of I mean, right, like I can't even go to the place of like before the origin of things that happened, you know, like was
Yeah.
there anything or was there not? It's so hard to think about. I just honestly can't even do it.
No.
Um,
Maybe it's
that's
about
why
breaking frame. Do you know
say
how
that again.
maybe it's about breaking frame because you know how we live
Mm,
in space and time. And perhaps if you escape space or space and time, you go beyond
I like
things. You know what I mean? Like then you're beyond those categories. I think that that might be why the word nothing and infinity are so close together because maybe they're more like symbols referring to a reality beyond our own. A reality where those maybe they refer to something like that beyond the categories.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I feel like in the story of the numbers from 0 to 8, you go really quickly from 0 through 1 to 2. And
Yeah.
and then there's like a massive leap from 2 to 3. Um, but like the 0, 1, 2 part, I feel like happens in an instant or something because you as you said it's like stepping outside the frame of nothing like maybe gives you the something, and
Yeah.
then once you get the something you get the not something
Mm,
right, like and then that gives you and so the third step, the big step, is getting outside the something and the not something and seeing that relationship. And so yeah, I just think there's such a big leap in three from two to three,
Yeah.
and a very simple path from zero to two.
Reminds me of Adam and Eve, like when she eats the fruit, go from zero to one, and then afterwards you have to reconcile some things, figure it out.
Oh, I've never thought about it that way before.
I know that Bernardo Kastrup describes that moment as the moment we were meta conscious, I think. So it's kind of like, it's the type of consciousness we have now. And in the Bible, it's described, I think, as the knowledge of good and evil. So it's kind of this knowing. It's kind of going beyond nature. And I've thought about nature a lot, but it's kind of the ability to become unnatural. And I guess the third step is
Mhm.
it's either learning how to become natural again, but doing it with that enhanced consciousness, or escaping all of that altogether. I don't know what that is.
Mm.
But I think that's beyond my grasp. I think I'd have to get words that refer beyond words to speak about it.
That's really interesting. I just want to point out that I liked that you said sort of above good and evil was knowledge. And it's like there's that again. There's the polarity, and then the
Hmm.
knowledge of the polarity,
Yeah,
right, is where the interesting stuff happens and the asymmetry sort of the symmetry breaks, and like we get into some new thing, which is the idea of a relationship and not just the things themselves.
yeah,
Um, so oh gosh. I'm trying to pick up. There's so many lots of things that you say are like
yeah.
really just
You got a relevance realize. You gotta get, you got a
yeah.
combinatorial explosion, my friend.
Um, yeah, that's really cool. It's bringing me back to like well the health and the disease, right? When you bring
Hmm.
up like knowledge of good and evil, it's like bringing me back to the like how do you navigate or balance your healthiness and your disease, or like how are you getting in tune or in harmony with your own good in your life.
Yeah,
Um and recognizing a lot of that. Do you I find it hard to I find it hard to be really reflective and then live that through
yeah,
in my
yeah. That's
you
like
know
feedback, right?
yeah, but like if I really like take to heart the idea of like my disease and my health is contingent like on whether or not I'm harmonizing like with my life, um putting what I see, like I can see and reflect like where I'm in harmony and where I'm not in harmony occasionally, not that often,
Hmm.
but then taking the next step and like retuning myself or like playing a different melody to like get it right.
Yeah,
I
that's the difficult part.
find that really difficult.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's maybe
s-
where you need chaos, to be honest.
Interesting. Why?
Well, we are so static in many ways over the years. I like the analogy that's like ski slopes, like you have the mountain of snow, and then you keep
Oh,
going into the same ski slopes. And the deeper we go, the deeper entrenched our behavior is. That's why it's always hard for people that are middle aged to change their behavior. And if you do want them to change their behavior, they need kind of like a reset. So that's why psychedelic experience seem to be so helpful for that. It's because
uh,
they let different parts of the brain speak to each other. So their entire aperture is like there's entropy in the system, there's noise in the system, and then you can see things from a different point of view. So like going into the water can allow you to be reborn. The water being the chaos, the rebirth being the new patterns that you can now consciously um,
mm,
navigate or create.
that's really cool. Yeah, the chaos again is that's like what gives the potential some movement or something, right?
Yeah,
Like the or like you said, the static, it's what like turns the static into something dynamic, which is like
Yeah.
ultimately like maybe what needs to happen is like
Yes.
being static can only like go so far, or like if you're static too long, then you what, or you're done, or you're you know you can't move, and like we need movement or we need change, or static is temporary.
Yeah.
uh, or if it's not, then you lose existence or
Yeah,
something,
you die. You turn into stone.
yeah, or yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
you turn to stone. um wow, that's really cool. uh
Actually, it's like imbalance. Do you know, you spoke about balance and imbalance. I think
right,
you need imbalance to escape that. That's exactly what you used. You said that the static was like balance and the dynamic was like imbalance, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
If you want to, so I'll give a personal example. At the first 18 years of my life, I developed all these patterns and whatnot. And then I drastically wanted to change my life. Wait, you're still here, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry, you were just standing still. I thought you were freezing.
Oh, I was listening.
Turning into stone. No, no. And then I took time off, and I think the lockdowns hit and everything, and I completely reshaped my life. So I threw everything away that I had, all the habits, and then that was the chaos, let's say. And then I lived a very imbalanced, or let's say a chaotic lifestyle, in the sense that I cut off all people, and then
Mm,
I started to create new structures.
mm.
But it took a time of imbalance to reshape my reality. So it took a lot. It took entropy. I threw entropy into my system so that I could find out what I did want to hang on to.
Yeah. And not that it was all like happy and good, or like,
No.
like I'm sure some of it was like scary or like
Yeah.
difficult or painful, but the imbalance affords you the opportunity for change and learning.
Hmm.
Uh, for sure. Yeah. Oh gosh. I can relate to that sort of like throwing everything out. I think of
Yeah.
myself as I spent a lot of time filling up this jar, like thinking about the static part of myself as like the jar, and then I had this life-shattering event, and like all of the pieces where the jar was empty, and the jar was not even a jar anymore. It was shattered. And so like first you have to like put your structure back together to like get a jar and then you can start like filling the jar up again.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of like you, I feel like the the emptiness was an opportunity to refill.
Hmm.
As before being shattered, it's like there was stuff down at the bottom of the jar I couldn't touch anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it was buried so deep. It was um right, and it took like that shattering, that chaos to just yeah, allow for the opportunity of something different to take up
Hmm.
that space, or
Yeah.
whatever.
And it goes both ways with people, because we spoke about the lockdown, but also people being unemployed, for example. Spoke about this today. It can really go both ways. Like a friend of ours, she's unemployed now for a little bit, and she's turning into like the most healthy person we've ever seen. You know, like she's working out like crazy. She's completely taking agency. And with other people, what happens, or what has happened a lot, is that it went the complete other way. So when the lockdown hit, they just turn into um, they just go into the couch and they do nothing all day. So that's that entropy. You need to be able to turn that entropy into something if it's useful for you. Otherwise, you need structure at all times.
Yep. And in both of those cases, the job is never done, right?
Mm,
So even for that person that is became really healthy, it's like, yes, and it will still have to withstand the test of time,
yeah,
right? And so it's
exactly.
a continuous sort of new, it's always balancing, right? There's you know, and I mean the balance between static and dynamic, or balanced and imbalance. There's a balancing between balanced and imbalance, or chaos
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's ever changing. Um, and either person in that case of like the lockdowns or whatever, or like a traumatic event or whatever you and I just referenced, there's opportunities to go in many different directions. You could maybe say like two directions at any given time or something like that. You could
Yeah.
simplify. Um, and you can always turn it around, and you can always get turned around as well. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, look out for the time when you take a turn for the worst, and don't give up hope on like turning it around as well. If you're not in the place where you feel it's like beautiful or healthy,
Yeah.
because there's amazing, incredible stories in both directions,
Mm.
really. And I think we're all capable of either end of those.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, I'm coming to the end of my free time, man.
Yeah, that's all good. It's always a pleasure. Scott is a father, so
Yeah,
that's it. But that's
that's
beautiful. That's your duty
oh,
now.
oh man, I want to talk more, Lucas, and
Yeah.
like there's I feel like there's things that we could just collaborate on besides just talking. And
Hmm.
also you are someone that is in a position to create connections, and so you play a role of like connecting things and connecting people and thoughts together. And
Yeah.
so if you ever think about like doing a project from that like privileged position that you have of interaction and all of that,
Yeah.
just reach out to me and tell me how I can contribute to whatever it is you're doing and collaborate. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. More than anything, I'd love to play football with you, soccer
oh,
one day. That would be awesome collaboration.
I have to do a health because I'm out of practice, but
Yeah.
I can
If I'm
still move.
ever, yeah,
I, I can still move around pretty good.
I believe that it's built in. It's been a
All
pleasure,
right,
Scott.
dude. All right, we'll set up another one.
Absolutely. Thank you
I
so
really,
much for your time today, y'all. Good to see you
yeah,
again.
I appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
All right. See you, my friend.